My name is Jeremiah Johnson. I am the founder of the Center for New Liberalism. Thank you. I also write at Infinite Scroll on Substack, and I have had a long time interest in gambling and statistical related things. Before I got into politics, I was a data scientist and a semi-professional poker player. And today we're here to talk about kind of the intersection of two things that I love, trying to predict things and politics. We're talking about the politics of prediction markets with a specific focus on the CFTC, their proposed ban of prediction markets effectively. We're going to get into the details of exactly what's being banned. But that is what we want to cover today. The way we're going to do this is about 30 minutes of conversation between the panelists up here, and then I'm going to try to my best to reserve about half the time for questions and comments from the audience as well. That, you guys, if you have strong points of view, we'd love to hear them. The panel may react to them. Even if you want to do that really annoying thing that people do, where they're like, I have more. Oh, sorry. We're trying to fix something. Say something? Hello, we're back. Even if you want to do that thing where it's like, technically I have more of a comment than a question. Even if you want to do that, that's actually fine. I encourage that, so have your thoughts ready. I'm also going to pass it off to my two co-panelists here so they can introduce themselves quickly, and then we'll get started.
Hey, I'm Maxim Lott. I created electionbettingodds.com in 2015. I'm also the executive producer for John Stossel. It's like a libertarian TV show. We've covered this a lot. And I have a Substack, Maximum Truth, where I've done data deep dives comparing whether prediction markets are better than Nate Silver and stuff like that.
Hi, everybody. My name is Peter Hammon. I'm an attorney and advisor to a number of companies in the prediction market and sports betting space. In particular, a number of betting exchanges like Smarkets, Sport Trade, and now Manifold as well.
All right, so I think we should do a high-level overview just because most people in this room will be pretty familiar, but let's, Peter, can you give us kind of the 30-second to 1-minute version of what precisely in legal terms is happening with prediction markets and the CFTC at a high level?
Sure, I'll do my best to kind of give the 30,000-foot view. So most of you in this room probably know that as of today, your real only legal options for betting on politics in the United States today is PredictIt. Now, the reality, of course, is any one of us from our phone right now could bet on the 2024 election on 50 different websites, offshore betting websites, sports books that are semi-legal, let's say. But the CFTC really only has purview over designated contract markets for folks like Kalshi who are trying to actually pursue CFTC regulation over their markets for election betting. So PredictIt currently operates under what is called a no-action letter. Essentially, that means PredictIt went to the CFTC, said, hey, we're going to offer a very, very limited version, a very limited menu of betting options. We're going to do it specifically for an academic purpose. We're going to limit the types of bets that can be offered. We're going to limit the amount you can wager on these election odds. And CFTC said, okay, as long as you stick to those rules, we're going to allow you to operate and we're not going to interfere. Unfortunately, whether you agree or not with what I'm about to say, the CFTC now believes that PredictIt has strayed from those specific terms of that agreement and is now seeking to go ahead and actually ban PredictIt. I know there's some folks from Kalshi in the room who can probably update you on how the conversation is going between Kalshi and the CFTC today. But basically, the CFTC is going to issue, we expect, another letter that is going to say no more bets on politics, period, and no more designated contracts on sporting events.
And I'll add there, it's really all events, and events is kind of ambiguous at this point, but it would, like the Oscars, you wouldn't be able to put make a prediction market on the Oscars, and anything if you extrapolate out from there, what could be considered an event. So I will add, from a political perspective, the CFTC's rationale is that in the technical sense, they've revoked this letter of permission that, oh, we think you've done technical thing this and technical, there's some other group that's running the block. They have all these kind of technical reasons why they think that Predicted has strayed from their supposed mandate. But there is also political pressure behind this. There are a number of politicians, senators, members of Congress, executive branch regulators who are just kind of unhappy with the state of prediction markets, gambling on elections in general, and they just don't like it. And that's the background behind why all of the sudden I believe that the CFTC has suddenly realized that things are no good. And Maxim, maybe you have a little more to say about kind of the intersection of what some of the reasoning is behind, like, why do they say, the politicians, that they think this is a bad thing?
Yeah, I haven't really seen any politicians say publicly, we hate prediction markets. And I don't see it in the political discourse either. It's not like on CNN you have people, we need to ban these, they're ruining our country. But the CFTC, like you said, they put out an announcement that they plan on banning prediction markets. And they explain why they want to do that. And the reasons, I think they're not very strong. Their biggest reason is we want to preserve the purity of democracy. And they use those words, and they're saying, well, if people are betting on elections, maybe they'll be incentivized to manipulate an election or throw an election or cause all these problems for democracy. That's their biggest substantive reason. Another big reason they gave, which I think is more likely the real reason, is they say we don't want to spend resources and time approving these markets. More and more people have been trying to do these markets, and we don't have the time for it. I think this is pretty silly because they could just easily legalize them by default and say they're approved unless we look and say it's really bad. And Congress had a law, it's in Dodd-Frank, passed about 15 years ago, and they said you cannot bet on assassination, terrorism, war, or gaming. And what the CFTC is now trying to do is say elections count as gaming. It's kind of a bizarre take, in my opinion. Not just elections, but Oscars, all these things. I'll be curious to hear your lawyer's opinion on it. But, and I think it's a weak legal case, but we'll see. Yeah.
Well, so I want to follow up there here as kind of our unofficial host. I think there's something to the idea that they don't want to devote resources towards regulating these markets because, for instance, the stock market and options and derivatives and all those things are typically regulated by a lot of different things, whether it's the CFTC, which is commodity futures, right? And so future contracts will be under the CFTC. The SEC will regulate a lot of different things. And even though trading, shorting a stock is legal, the SEC has to do a lot of investigation of particular short sellers because of market manipulation. They actually do have entire enforcement teams to see, are people, are they illegally doing certain things to influence the markets? Are they engaging in manipulation? Are they doing schemes? I'm not in finance, but there's whole teams of people, even though all these things are legal. So part of me sympathizes with if there's, markets on all these different things, are they going to have to build out kind of a election market manipulation regulation investigation unit?
Yeah, I mean, that's a valid concern. I was just reading so the CFTC has 5 commissioners, and it's a very unusual structure. 3 of them, most 3 of them can be from one political party. So right now, because it's a Biden administration, there are 3 Democrats, 2 Republicans. And the 2 Republicans both dissented from this proposal to ban these markets. And they laid out their reasons in detail. And their comments on this, one of them said, we should just devote more resources to this. She seemed to think that they could scare them up. And then, let's see, the other was pointing out that, the CFTC covers all sorts of things like crop insurance. And she says, we're not a crop insurance regulator. We don't like go to a farm and make sure they're not manipulating the market for crops that year. It's the same with elections. Like, we just do our normal thing with this. We're not going to go into the voting booth, make sure it wasn't rigged. So I thought those were strong arguments.
Yeah, I mostly agree with what Maxim just said. But the one thing I want to emphasize is the amount of resources it would take to actually regulate political prediction markets would likely be minimal. Like you said, they're going to put, if they were to regulate them, they're going to put real policies in place, and they're going to do things like spot checks to make sure that the folks who are approved to offer political prediction markets are actually doing the things that they say they're doing. But much like with sports betting regulation or with any other form of market regulation, the actual resources that are deployed are minimal on a per unit basis.
I will also point out, having taken the CFTC's side there for a second, that these resources are normally in proportion to the size of the markets impacted. There's a lot more money that goes into bond trading, for instance, than there will ever be in prediction markets. So, I think the idea that you would need a large team for this is probably a little silly. One thing that I think is really central here, and maybe is the most important thing to learn about the politics of prediction markets, if you learn one thing from this, is that, and I really cannot emphasize this enough, prediction markets do not matter at all to anyone who works in Washington, D.C., even a little bit. And that's a wildly overgeneral statement, but if you take that as directionally true, there's so many things that elected people in D.C. are worrying about: war and the economy and healthcare and LGBTQ rights and blah, blah, like so many things. And probably like the most ardent prediction market thinker in Washington, D.C. among Congress, among senators, might have it as like their 85th most popular, most important thing that they think about. So that's kind of what you're working with. And what that means ultimately is that prediction markets get seen through a lens of some other issue. You guys have already mentioned election integrity. The Senator, I think Jeff Merkley, I hope I'm remembering his name correctly, from Oregon. Any Oregonians in the House? Maybe a couple. So your senator is one of the Democrats who's very concerned about election integrity. And, there's maybe some legitimate things to worry about. I don't know if foreign countries are trying to do that, or, Trump is calling Brad Raffensperger and asking to find 11,000 votes, and Democrats are very scared about this issue now. And so he sees prediction markets not as their own thing, but through the lens of election integrity. You might have Republicans who feel the opposite of Jeff Merkley, but they see it through the lens of financial regulation, that they, in general, think we should have looser, more free market-oriented regulations, and they don't really care about prediction markets in and of themselves. Is this something you've seen? I know you work with John Stossel. Does that kind of influence the libertarian or Republican view, because you're in that world?
Yeah, I think that's totally right. I think I first covered prediction markets in 2007 with John Stossel, and yeah, the reason we're interested in it as libertarians was there's a way of markets getting at the truth. And libertarians like markets. It's just this really cool mechanism. We right now use it for the stock market to allocate resources where they need to go. You can do the same thing with information, and it's really cool. And so that's kind of that perspective. And Republicans in general are kind of knee-jerk anti-regulation, and I think you see some of that in this split.
Just to add something really quickly that I think politicians often miss when they speak on this topic is there seems to be this idea that betting on elections isn't happening today, or if we don't permit political prediction markets, no one will ever bet on the outcome of elections. It's simply not true. Like I mentioned, there's offshore betting websites where you could bet on the outcome of the 2024 election today. You could use Predict It. It was also quite commonplace up until about 1940 for folks to bet on the outcome of U.S. presidential elections. Famously, the New York Stock Exchange used to take wagers on the outcome of presidential elections up until, I think, 1940, I want to say. And it was one of their most highest traded shares or highest traded outcomes. So there's a long history of actually betting on politics in the United States, and I think oftentimes politicians forget about that.
I can comment on the Democratic side too. When Predicted and a few other small academic projects were given these letters by the CFTC, it was like 10, 15 years ago, it was a very different environment, and Democrats, I think, were much more positive about prediction markets. You had people like Justin Wolfers, like just an economist who did studies about how effective they are, and it was much more positive, like this is a cool mechanism, and yeah.
I was just going to say, Republican or Democrat, economists will tend to be pretty in favor of these things.
That's true. But basically the CFTC was like, this is a cool thing, let's try it out. And it has honestly worked pretty well. There have been no big market manipulation things, but it's changed. As far as I can tell, the biggest thing is the election integrity thing you pointed out. And Democrats are very sensitive to that at this moment.
So when I think about getting things done in politics, this is a wild oversimplification, but there are kind of two main pathways that people normally think about. Like, I have a policy, I have something that I'd like to happen, how do I make it happen? Number one is it's something that regular, everyday people care about. That's probably not going to be the case with prediction markets. You're never going to get 100,000 people calling into a senator's office to talk about prediction market regulation in the same way that they will about their health care, about jobs, about trade, about many of these things that they really intensely care about that for just hit the everyday person. The other way is money. And something doesn't have to matter to every single person in the country. It can be a very niche thing. But if there's enough money and organizations that are funded to regulate that kind of, or not to regulate, if they're funded to organize around that kind of thing, that can be a secondary way. And that's how a lot of niche issues get their movement going, is they start like us with a bunch of nerds in a room who care about some specific thing, and they get funded, they get organized, and they go through secret Congress where Congress will pass whatever they want to, and it's never even makes the national news. So I guess this one's for you, Peter. Do you see any pathway there through kind of the secret Congress? We get some funding, we go talk to some people, and we kind of sneak this through, and it doesn't ever have to be a big national conversation. I ask you because you are having more conversations directly with some of these regulatory bodies.
Yeah, I think we're well beyond that point, unfortunately. Sorry about that, guys. All right, there we go. So no, I think the cat's out of the bag on that one. I don't see that as being possible at this point. The one opportunity I think that is out there.
You don't see it as possible because it's already become too public, too
Correct.
polarized?
Correct. Yeah, and there are too many now high-profile cases. Whether that's Predicted, I mentioned Kalshi already. It's hard to see something going under the radar, either in terms of a piece of legislation or the CFTC somehow tweaking a rule to just blanket allowing for prediction markets on politics. What I could see is the CFTC taking the opinion that this is now a state issue, much like I project that they will with respect to quote-unquote gaming contracts or gaming prediction markets. They're going to say, hey, this is traditionally the purview of the states, right? Gambling regulation is a state issue. They could theoretically make the same claim for political prediction markets.
I was going to jump in and say it's very odd that we've had this kind of crackdown on prediction markets at the same time that we've had an explosion in legal sports betting.
Yeah, so I'll hold it up here.
It hates you specifically.
Not used to talking on the microphone, guys. There we go. All right, I think I've got it figured out now. Thank you. Yeah, so and I'm very familiar with the explosion in sports betting. That's been my primary purview as an attorney, is sports betting regulation and licensing. So very familiar with that. But right now, most states, even if I think there are actually a number of states that would be interested in allowing their sports betting operators today to take bets on politics. Actually, a few years ago, the state of West Virginia approved betting on politics. In other words, they said, hey, we have a number of licensed sports betting operators today, and we are going to allow those operators to actually take bets on the outcomes of elections. There was a whole big hullabaloo once that press release came out, and they actually reneged on that decision. But I think if the CFTC were to come out and say, hey, we're going to leave this alone, make it a state issue, there would be a number of states that would be interested in approving bets on politics, because those states like to tax and regulate, and they believe they can make a little bit of money off of these transactions.
So the other thing that strikes me that you didn't mention there, it could be devolved to the states. That's something that could happen. We could have legislative action. That's, in my mind, very unlikely, but theoretically possible. But the other thing that could happen is executive action. Normally when something is, we've got a very deadlocked era of Congress the last decade or so, but executive actions are more popular than ever, and the CFTC does not have permanent seats the way that like the Supreme Court does. There's a complicated schedule, but roughly every election, let's say, someone gets replaced. So do you think there's any chance that depending on whether or not Biden wins re-election, that could influence whether or not the CFTC takes action on this?
Yeah, so I looked up the CFTC terms, and one of the commissioners, a Democrat, is getting replaced in April. So there's this interesting thing that if Trump were to win, he would get to replace that seat, and then they may reverse this regulation and end the ban. Now, government moves extremely slowly, so it's not even clear that the regulation, they've proposed the regulation to ban prediction markets. It's not even clear the regulation will be in force a year from now at that point, in which case maybe they could just rescind it, say, actually, we're not going to do it. Or it might be, and then they would have to propose a new regulation, and that'll take another year and a half. So there's the pace of government, but yeah, the election could definitely impact the outcome. It's pretty clear Trump is good for prediction markets. Whatever else one thinks about him, it's pretty clear that's the pro-prediction market side.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is that is definitely possible, but I think for everyone in this room that's either an interested party or an investor or running one of these businesses today, I wouldn't necessarily want to see that particular outcome, because then we're setting ourselves up for a flip-flop every 4 or every 8 years where the regulation is changing depending on which side has 3 of 5 commissioners at the CFTC, and that's just a miserable experience, I think, for everyone here.
I think there's a analogous policy. If anybody's followed the battles over net neutrality, which, if you were on Reddit, for instance, like, I don't know, what was it, 10 years ago, it seemed like net neutrality was the single most important thing that would ever happen. They did end up taking net neutrality away, and to my eye, it kind of seems like the internet survived. I don't know if I'm being too flippant there, but now they've also, I only say that because the Republican-led Ajit Pai took net neutrality away, and they've just recently tried to reinstate it, I think. And if Trump wins again, they will probably take it back, and it's going to keep doing that. So with net neutrality, I actually don't see that it's had a ton of impact. With prediction markets, literally just, are you legal or are you not? It could have significant impact. So I said I would try to reserve a decent chunk of time for audience comments, questions. The one thing I will ask, I'm very happy for you to give comment, not a question, but I will ask you to keep it to 30 seconds. So state your ideas very concisely, and then we will react to them up here. But so I want to see who's got comments, questions, thoughts for the panel. Right there. And Should we pass the mic around or just stand up and speak in a loud voice? What's easier? Let's stand up and speak in a loud voice.
Thanks for holding this. It's very fascinating. I guess I have a sort of question about, I guess in recent times, or perhaps most times, it's not uncommon to have a candidate who has very devoted following, but is not very popular with the general vote. What's to stop someone from just coming in, sort of ginning up their party, or perhaps people, not even their voting base, outside their voting base, the same party, getting all these donations, getting this populist, knowing that they won't have a chance in any election, sort of putting their money against that, sort of way to manipulate these political energies.
This is essentially a question about what's to stop a fringe candidate from betting against themselves in prediction markets. I mean, at first glance, nothing, but it would be an odd way, given the size of these markets, my first thought is it's an odd way to make money to bet against yourself when, if you've gotten to the point, like let's use RFK as a model here. If you've gotten to the point where you've gotten as much press as RFK and you're potentially going to get 5 to 10% of the national vote, there are so many other ways for you to grift money. And I'm sorry to just call RFK a grifter, but we can call a spade, but he's got so many amazing grifting opportunities. Why would he need that one? That's my first thought. I don't know if you guys have one.
So this reminds me a lot of questions that we used to get when states were considering legalizing sports betting, which is, hey, if we legalize sports betting, isn't this going to lead to a ton of match fixing concerns? The answer I always have is regulating something like that is the quickest and easiest way to catch that exact thing that you're talking about. Because right now, today, theoretically, the person you're talking about could do that right now. They could do it by betting in the UK. They could do that by betting in Canada. They could do that by betting on illegal websites in the United States today. But if they were doing that on legal, regulated, CFTC oversight, or places where they have CFTC oversight, then the likelihood that they get caught significantly increases, and therefore they become less likely to actually try to manipulate the election in that way.
Yeah, and your question really gets to the CFTC's main concern about election integrity, but I think it kind of falls apart like these guys suggested. And I think pretty much any scenario you imagine about how you're going to make money by screwing with elections falls apart pretty quickly. I mean, with the RFK thing, his odds on the betting markets are like 1%. So what he's going to make a 1% return, invest $1 million and get $10,000 back from losing when everyone already knows he will. So, it's not a good way to make money.
Think about how much money an RFK podcast could make. Seriously, it's a lot more than you're thinking. As someone in the podcast business. But anyway, let's take the next question. Sorry, orange shirt. I saw you, or peach.
So you mentioned how they're worried about people could interfere in elections to influence prediction markets. It feels like there was another concern is the other way around, where candidates could buy a bunch of shares in prediction markets to boost their own odds, and especially in primaries where having an illusion of momentum at a key point is a self-fulfilling prophecy. It seems like manipulating prediction markets could theoretically translate into better actual election odds. Is there any concern about that direction?
That's fascinating to me because I can see some sort of theoretical argument how that would work, but also this would involve a candidate saying, I'm going to spend my money not on campaign advertisements, not on get out the vote effort, not on paying an army of door knockers and phone bankers, but I'm going to instead use that money to pump a prediction market site. And maybe there's a world where that is actually the most effective use of the money, but I find it hard to imagine that it would be more effective to do that rather than the actual work of a campaign. So that's just my first thought.
Yeah, the other thing is, people already worry about this with polling. Like a candidate can fund their own poll, make it biased, and look like they're in the lead. And that hasn't destroyed our democracy or anything.
I think it also depends on the size of prediction markets. Like, if you're dealing with very small prediction markets, illiquid, not a lot of money, maybe that's a viable pathway. But if you're dealing with a fully liquid prediction market where there's a many, many millions or tens of millions or hundreds of millions of dollars being bet, that seems to be, you would be spending a ton of money to move just a couple percentage points. And, for instance, like the U.S. presidential elections are, billions of dollars are bet on those markets if you aggregate the European gambling sites and things like that. So I will pass right here.
That actually happened, though. Like in 2012, there was a paper published in 2013 about attempted in-trade manipulation for the 2012 election, where someone spent, basically lost a bunch of money trying to move the odds of a Mitt Romney victory. So there's a paper published that is speculating that was what happened at the time.
I mean, it's interesting because it obviously didn't make any difference in Mitt Romney's campaign. So right here, and I'll just pass you this.
Hey, I'm Barack. And thanks for the panel. I just think this exact conversation we're having now about the risks demonstrates the whole, if you're explaining, you're losing. And it's how can we, when these things are not mainstream, how can we make an affirmative case for them to policy members that this, yes, has risks, but would allow us to have better information about various outcomes and improve politics, etc. Without getting bogged down.
Well, so here's what I'll say to that. And I actually have kind of an interesting theory about this, which it may not be the most popular theory in this room, but in terms of, how do you actually get the money to make this happen? I'm going to make an analogy to cryptocurrency, which is another it started out as a weird niche thing that only nerds cared about. But the thing with crypto is that, what is the market cap for Bitcoin right now? Like $1 trillion or something like that? And Ethereum is $500 billion. And so there's a lot of people in crypto who stand to make an absolutely enormous amount of money, given whether we, make crypto regulation A or crypto regulation B. And so they are willing to invest enormous amounts of money in making that happen. And I don't see that currently exists in prediction markets. Certainly you can make some money in prediction markets, but nobody stands to make $5 billion based on the change of a comma in a regulation or something like that. The only way that I can see it happening is if someone like Goldman Sachs gets interested. And you saw a lot of movement in crypto when mainstream finance all of a sudden got interested in it. So, if Goldman Sachs decides they are interested in, having prediction markets for elections and selling prediction futures on who the next president is, that might actually do something. Whereas, I don't know that Kalshi or Manifold has the same pull in Washington, D.C. that Goldman Sachs does. I don't know if you guys have other thoughts about how we affirmatively make that case. My answer is get somebody with trillions of dollars to do it.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think one thing is conditional probabilities. And if we had liquid markets, you'd see, okay, if Trump is going to get in there, what's the unemployment rate going to be? What's the immigration rate going to be? If Biden, what's it going to be for him? So that would actually give us useful information.
Yeah, I like that idea. I actually never heard of that before or thought about that, so that's pretty creative. I guess my answer would be, it's this again. This, I hate to keep sounding like a broken record, but this reminds me of the conversation around sports betting from 5 or 6 years ago, and it really is about, like Jeremiah said, finding key stakeholders that are invested in the outcome. In our case, it was casinos, land-based casinos who wanted to offer sports betting, expand their package of gambling options. So I guess we've got to figure out who is our land-based casino in this case, and then really, really hammer the point about this is something that's already happening today. I mean, again, any one of us could place a bet on the election in the next 3 minutes if we wanted to, with a credit card and a birth date. So this, if it's happening already, why not regulate it and why not tax it?
Just one other thing on why it's useful. Like, just knowing who's likely to win can be useful for people's planning. Like maybe someone's starting a business, or they think they'll need an abortion, or they have some startup idea that could be banned or not banned depending on the president. And knowing that, oh, it's 90% this person's going to win, that could be just useful. More information is useful to people.
I love how Maxim is so much more optimistic than I am. He's actually making the case for the public good of prediction markets, which, to be clear, I agree with. I agree that like prediction markets have positive social externalities, or whatever we want to call them. Whereas I'm sitting here saying, though, nah, you got to find somebody with money. It's all going to be about the money. I almost give up on trying to make that case, and I'm just like, look, if prediction markets ever become legal in the way we really want them to, it's going to be the case that you can go buy, senatorial futures on Vanguard. And so you got to get Vanguard and interested in making that kind of money. So that's kind of how I think about how do we actually, in a practical sense, make this work. That's been what I've been thinking about recently. Somebody way in the back in the white shirt, yeah. Do we have Tarek in the crowd, by the way? From Kalshi? I was just wondering because I think he's here. So he could, we have the CEO of Kalshi, I think, somewhere at the conference. So he could answer the second one directly in terms of what is the appetite for fighting this. But I'll let you guys handle this in terms of the first question was, how does the CFTC defending this and how final is it going to be? And kind of where are we technically in the process here?
You want to start?
Yeah, I'll take a crack at a few of those. So in terms of the finality, I think we spoke about this already, but the finality is only until the next case comes in front of the CFTC or there's a change in the mix in commissioners and they want to come up with a different ruling. So it's final only until it's not final anymore, if that makes sense.
Aren't they technically right now under, a judge has put it under, what's the legal term? I'm blanking. A stay? It's not actually being enforced right now because
Correct.
There's an appeal.
There are two different things. There's the
Yeah.
predicted ban, and then there's the ban of everything. They're both going
Right.
through the process. Right?
I think the folks from Kalshi want to weigh in here.
Can we get? Yeah. Actually, do you want to just come up and grab the mic and you could also potentially tell us about the appetite, how much appetite there is to fight this. I knew we would have somebody. So.
Somebody. Oh wow, no clapping. I'll go back to. Yeah, I'll go here. I mean that's weird. So yeah, I mean we started working on election stuff I think October 2021. So we've been working on this for 2.5 years. I think we really want to see it through. I don't know if we sued the CFTC on this last year, and the hearing for the case was actually May 31st. And the transcript is online, so everyone can read it. I actually think it was very positive towards us. We were very optimistic about this. But we are, even if the district court doesn't go in our case, we are going to most likely appeal and see it all the way through. And I think that's one of the things that wasn't discussed, that we do think that the judicial, path is one that could be very beneficial to us. Because I think Predicted is suing them, of course, and we are also suing them. And we can get more clarity that way. And then obviously if we do win the lawsuit, the regulation itself becomes moot because the regulation is based on the same things that our lawsuits are on. So everything is kind of really taken back, and the schedule, with the election, depending on who wins, all of that stuff gets a lot into play. So we really believe in the good things about political prediction markets, and we are going to see it through. We have a lot of funding, so until we die, we're gonna be fighting for that. So that's it. Thank you.
And the one thing I'll say here is that we did kind of neglect the judicial pathway. I tend to view judicial pathways as incomplete in most cases. Like sometimes people think, to use an example of gay marriage, that like, oh, it goes to the court and then the question is settled forever, because the Supreme Court did basically settle the question of gay marriage for everyone in America forever, unless it ever gets reversed. But a lot of other times, a judicial pathway leaves it as incomplete, because it could be the case that this judicial thing actually, Kalshi wins, and the rule gets overturned and they can never make another rule. But sometimes it's the case that then they just come back and come with a much more carefully worded rule that will actually survive a legal challenge this time. Or it just means that, okay, well, the legislators have to get off their butts and actually write new legislation. Sometimes that means you get an extra 10 years because legislators are very slow. But my view tends to be that judicial stuff is often just, it's a holding pattern. It's an incomplete finish until something else happens.
On the completeness question, there are two things I noticed. First, PredictIt's response. They sent an email to all their traders saying, please leave a comment with the CFTC. So for 1 month, any American can leave a comment saying, hey, I trade on prediction markets. I use the information. Please don't ban it. And apparently the CFTC is legally obligated to read it and give you a nice response. And so PredictIt feels, yeah, we'll flood them with these. Just give them some reason to play ball.
Of course, if you've ever read the comment sections on PredictIt, I'm not sure that's I'm not sure that's a great thing. We'll take another question. And actually, yeah. Any other thoughts?
There's actually a comment period is open right now for the regulations, so everyone, if you want to write something, they do have to read every single one of them.
Can someone post the link to where you can submit comments in the Discord? We have a Manifest Discord, right? Somebody post that link in the Discord. Who else has a question? I think way back left there. Wonderful to have you here.
So I'm not going to give away everything I'm going to talk about on Sunday, but Lara's very modest. Last Friday in the DC Circuit Court, their lawyers, Kalshi's lawyers, crushed it against the government lawyers. I mean, it wasn't even close. It was a packed room. There were probably 75 people there, and they performed brilliantly. So keep that up. And the most important thing right now is the comments. I know it sounds hokey, and I didn't believe this up until my lawyers sat us down and explained why this comment period is so important. So we will put in the Discord, we'll put the link. But it's very important that by law, they have to respond to substantive comments, and they've got to tally them. And part of this is about ignoring an arbitrary and capricious behavior by a government agency. So we'll talk about more of this over the weekend, but you guys did great, and congratulations on that. It's still an uphill fight, but this is really not our fight. I mean, we'll go to the Supreme Court if we have to, and I'm sure we'll see you there. But the fact of the matter is, this is your fight, and I don't think there's anybody in this room, and I don't think there's anybody at the CFTC who doesn't think that these markets are going to prevail. It is a rearguard action. It's baffling even to the judges in the Fifth Circuit, who gave an injunction to PredictIt, enjoining the CFTC from shutting it down. It's extraordinary, if you think about it. So.
Again, this is what we talked about at the beginning, where this is really, I view this through a more cynical political lens, that the CFTC all of a sudden discovered these objections that they had. They discovered these objections that they had because of the fears of some other political issue, because of the fears of, election interference, essentially, on the Democratic side, which again may be a legitimate issue in its own right, that has now been extended into what we think may be an unrelated field. But we have just a little bit more time for maybe one or two more questions. Anybody? I have seen some other hands. I'm sorry if I haven't gotten to you. Right there.
Sure. Let me give the 30-second spiel here because I could talk about this for 15 minutes if I wanted to. But basically, the new project that Manifold announced tonight is not going to be subject to CFTC regulation. So we're not overly concerned with whatever they announce in the next month or so. That is because what Manifold is doing is creating a promotional sweepstakes, which is going to be a real money operation designed to promote the existing business of Manifold Markets, which, as everyone in this room I think knows, has a genuine societal value. And just like any other retail business or other business out there, they're entitled to promote that business. You see oftentimes sweepstakes in the context of, say, a grocery store, or maybe the most famous one out there is the McDonald's Monopoly game, if any of you guys have ever played that, where you buy a hamburger and you get a Monopoly token and you build out your board and maybe you win $1 million, maybe you win a free French fries. It's the same concept here with what Manifold announced tonight. This is going to be a sweepstakes that is designed to be purely a promotional tool to advertise and get more folks to sign up for the current prediction market offering that they have.
All right, and let's take maybe one more question. Anybody in the back there? Yes. That is a good question. There may be some history here. Do either one of you guys have I'd imagine, Peter, you have a pretty informed view on this? Because sports betting has a very, very long history. You could probably go back to the actual Greek Olympics and find people betting on which, wrestler covered in olive oil is going to be,
Yeah, so the short legal answer is that the CFTC purview does not extend. The folks at CalSheet may disagree with me here, but theoretically, their argument at CFTC is that the Commodities Exchange Act does not cover sports, because sports betting is considered to be gaming or gambling, and gambling has long traditionally been under the purview of state regulation and not federal regulation. So the CFTC, as a federal agency, theoretically does not have purview over sports or event markets because those are subject to state gambling agency regulation.
I think we will close there. I'm going to try to give us end a little bit early. So is there something after us, actually? Does anybody know? No, okay, we don't have to end early then. Okay, so we can take one more question then. I see right there, yes? I will say, and not as a, as not with the same level of sports betting knowledge as you, but with some level of sports betting knowledge, you are correct in the broad sense that smaller markets, less liquid markets, are more open to manipulation. The classic case of sports betting, gamblers and fixing matches is like low-level tennis. That, some tennis event in Romania between like the 300th and the 450th ranked players in the world who are good enough to be professional, semi-professional, but they don't make much money. Tennis players, if you're not in the top 100, really don't make much money. And so they play all these events, and that's where you see stuff, or you see soccer matches in Malaysia or something like that. And that is where, number one, most of the match fixing takes place. We do end up catching a decent amount of that. I think it would be arrogant to say that we catch all of it, because we certainly do not. But my just initial reaction is that in a broad sense, you are correct. I'm not sure how much to worry about it, but but it is a thing that could theoretically happen.
Yeah, it's worth noting that those markets might be easier to manipulate, but there's also less money available to be made there. Also, I want to say it's really encouraging to hear the prediction market founders here having optimism that the legal system will play out. It was also interesting reading the dissenting opinions on the CFTC's proposal, and they lay out pretty convincing legal stuff that this is not gaming, that the arguments are very weak, that the CFTC's own argument takes Senate discussion out of context. Like, it was almost like they were trying to help write a legal brief or something, and that gives me some optimism as well.
Yeah, just to second what the guys just said, you know, I don't have an opinion over whether Seychelles market manipulation is a good or bad thing. Not entirely sure where that is. I think it's in the Caribbean somewhere. I hope it is. But no? Where is it? South Pacific? Okay, well, hey, yikes. Hey, I'm a lawyer, not a geographer, so that's what you got for me. But yes, 100% correct. The smaller the market, the easier to manipulate, but you're also unlikely to make much money on those types of markets. And then for the fifth time, you know, again, if we regulate that activity, far easier to catch it. I know InTrade was mentioned maybe 30 minutes ago. I don't believe InTrade was regulated at the time that famous Romney trade was placed, but it's an argument for if InTrade was subject to CFTC or some other government regulation, the likelihood that that individual was identified, caught, and removed from the market, potentially prosecuted, would be much higher.
It also didn't work. Like, the paper says that they estimate the guy spent maybe $4 million. He moved the odds like 10 percentage points, and went back to the natural rate.
It ended up losing $4 million, not moving the percentage in the long term, and Romney still lost. So, I think we will close here. I will kind of close out with one thought, which is, I told you earlier, if you can understand one thing about the politics of this from a high-level view, it's that it doesn't matter to most politicians. This is going to be, even if they've heard of it, even if they have a stance on it, it's going to be their 80th most important issue behind healthcare and, you know, culture war stuff and the economy and all sorts of stuff. Now, that can make you pessimistic, that of course no politician's ever going to care about what I care about. But there's actually a case that sometimes that makes it easier if you have a loud, passionate group, you know, and a politician will decide, I don't care about this, so I don't want to piss them off. So if sometimes submitting all these comments can help. Sometimes a small, passionate group of people, if you have an issue that politicians just don't think about much either way, they'll just kind of do whatever the most passionate subgroup is. And so, oddly, politicians not caring at all about anybody in this room can be a positive thing in some instances if they just decide you're more trouble than you're worth to piss off. Because again, I promise you, they don't actually care one way or the other, whether we live or die as prediction markets. So in a weird way, that can be uplifting. Make enough noise and they'll leave you alone. And that's the positive, uplifting thought I will close on here. Thank you all for coming.